On the eve of my wedding, my fiancé beat and abused me in front of all his friends. In that moment, I understood. Either I die in this marriage or I walk away forever. My decision left everyone speechless. The first time Valerie wished she would die wasn't when Sebastian hit her. It was when she saw the laughter. Not the pain, not the screams, the laughter. The drunken cackles that floated over her half-naked, humiliated body. In that moment, something inside her broke forever. Valerie Mendoza was 24, but she had the eyes of someone who had seen too much for her age. Her skin, tanned from the sun of a city with too little shade, her hands, calloused from caring for others since she was a child, and her serene voice, though it carried an unexplainable melancholy, made anyone mistake her for older. But it wasn't age that had done this to her, it was life. And life for Valerie was never gentle. Her world existed on the fringes of a city that only remembered the poor during election season. She lived with her mother, Teresa, a woman emotionally scarred, trapped in a constant state of anxiety, marked by the beatings from her husband, Eusebio, and by silences that lasted for years. She also lived with her brother, Matteo, barely 13, who since the age of 9 had suffered from chronic kidney failure, keeping him halfway between childhood and death. Valerie had given up her own dreams to care for them both. She had been working at a bakery since she was 15. She studied at night and secretly dreamed of getting far away, where no one would yell at her to be quiet, where her body wouldn't tremble every time a door slammed shut. Her life had no room for fairy tales. Until Sebastian showed up. He was charismatic, confident, walked like the world belonged to him, and spoke with a sweetness that seemed genuine. The owner of several businesses, he had arrived in the neighborhood with a social support campaign, funding schools, donating food, taking selfies with poor kids. Everyone adored him. But Valerie listened. "You don't belong here," he told her the first time they spoke. "You were born to spend your life cleaning display cases and putting up with misery." That phrase was like a key. The key that unlocked the cage. Sebastian took her out of the bakery, showered her with promises, bought her clothes, took her to restaurants where the napkins were linen and the plates had no chipped edges. He talked about Paris, about living in a house by the sea, about a ring that would shine brighter than the streetlights in her neighborhood. And for the first time, Valerie believed someone could see past her story. Teresa was suspicious at first. "Men like that don't go for women like you because they love you, honey. They go for you because they want to keep you quiet." "Mom, for once in my life, I want to be happy," she replied. "Don't you take that from me too." And Teresa, who carried more guilt than health, caved. The wedding was announced as an almost royal event. Sebastian booked a luxury banquet hall outside the city. A famous designer made her dress, and local media were to cover the ceremony like a magazine wedding. Valerie was in a daze, as if floating above her own life without touching the ground. Each day was a new gift wrapped in gold foil, but inside, there was something cold, something that began to unsettle her. Sebastian became controlling. He didn't like her talking to her old friends. He fired the staff Valerie had chosen to help around the house without reason. He checked her phone. He changed her number without telling her. He forbade her from visiting her mother without his permission, but he did it with a smile, as if it were all for love. And when she got uncomfortable, he would hug her tight, stroke her hair, and say, "No one else is going to love you like I do. No one." A week before the wedding, Matteo collapsed at school. Valerie rushed to the hospital, still in the fitting gown for her wedding dress. The doctor was blunt. He needed a transplant. His kidney function is collapsing. He can't wait any longer. Valerie felt the world crashing down on her. She clung to her brother's hospital bed as he barely opened his eyes. "You promise not to cry, Val," Matteo whispered. "You're like a son. Don't cry or I'll go out." Sebastian didn't come to the hospital. He sent flowers and a private nurse. Then, when she got home, he told her, "I don't want you filling yourself with negative energy before our wedding. Matteo will be fine. Leave it in the doctor's hands. He's my brother, and I'm your future husband. I want your head focused on the start of our life, not on tragedies you can't solve." Valerie was silent. Tragedies. That's what he called the life she had before she met him. 2 nights before the wedding, Sebastian hosted a private party at his estate. "Men only. Tradition," he said. She wasn't invited, but at midnight she received a video call from one of the employees, a young man who sympathized with her. "Ms. Mendoza," he stammered. "I don't know if this is right, but you need to see this." The camera trembled. In the center of the hall, Sebastian sat on a kind of makeshift throne. Several men surrounded him, all drunk. A young woman, seemingly hired to entertain, was crying as two men pushed her toward him. Sebastian laughed. He didn't just laugh, he yelled things like, "They all belong to me. And let no one say I'm not the king." Valerie hung up the call, got in her car, and drove to the estate. When she arrived, no one would open the gate. She forced the lock, ran through the garden until she heard music and laughter. She pushed open the ballroom door. The silence was immediate. Sebastian saw her. His smile vanished. "What are you doing here?" he asked with a terrifying calmness. "What are you doing?" she retorted. "I told you this night was mine," he said, walking toward her. "Mine and my friends like you." Valerie backed away. He grabbed her arm. "Why do you always ruin everything I give you?" he whispered in her ear. And then, in front of everyone, he hit her. Not a slap. A dry punch to the stomach that knocked the air out of her. She fell to her knees. A few men stood up uncomfortable, but no one intervened. One even pulled out his phone. She tried to get up, but Sebastian grabbed her hair and dragged her in front of everyone. "Want to see how you tame a woman who forgets who's in charge?" he yelled. Valerie didn't scream. Her voice was gone. All she did was look. Look at every face, every gaze that didn't dare meet hers. And then, something inside her broke. It wasn't just fear. It was the brutal understanding that no one was going to save her. She woke up hours later in a dark room with the wedding dress draped over her. It was torn, stained, and bloody. The dress she had once dreamed of wearing was now a symbol of everything she had lost. She held it with trembling hands and began to cry. Not for what they had done to her. She cried because she had believed that this was love. She thought of her mother, her brother, the women in her neighborhood who said, "Stay quiet, it's worse if you leave." She thought of all the times she promised herself she wouldn't be like Teresa. She thought of the little girl who imagined castles and the woman she now was, humiliated, alone but alive. And then, in the darkness of that room, with the stained dress in her arms, she understood. And it was in that instant, amidst the shouts and laughter of others, that Valerie understood. Either I die in this marriage or I leave now forever. She chose to leave, but not in silence. Valerie couldn't sleep that night. The dress lay on the bed, stained, a silent witness to what they had done to her. The sun was just beginning to break the darkness, but she was already on her feet. She wasn't crying, she had cried enough. She looked at herself in the mirror, her left eye swollen, her lips split, her soul in tatters, but something was shining beneath the ruins. Determination. Sebastian was still asleep in some room on the estate, likely drunk, without a clue that the woman he thought he had destroyed was more alive than ever. Valerie took the cell phone the young employee had returned to her before he disappeared. She saved the video, the photos, the audio recordings. Then she took a shower. The water stung. Every bruise, every cut, every scrape of her skin reminded her of what she had lived through. She changed not into the original wedding dress, but another one. A simple, plain white dress with no jewels, no pretense. A dress that didn't shout, "I belong to someone," but rather, "I am here for myself." When she arrived home, her mother was waiting for her in the living room. Teresa looked at her as if she already knew what had happened. Her eyes were red, her hands clasped in her lap. "Where were you?" she asked in a low voice. Valerie didn't answer. She just looked at her. "Mom," she began. "I need you to listen to me without interrupting." Teresa tensed. "I'm not marrying Sebastian." "Valerie," she yelled, standing up. "Do you want to destroy what little you have left? He'll ruin your life. The wedding is today." "He already ruined it," Valerie said. Teresa froze. "What are you saying?" "That man hit me, humiliated me, treated me like a dog in front of his friends." "No," Teresa shook her head. "It can't be. And I'm going to expose him," Valerie continued. "I'm going to show the world who he is." "No," Teresa shrieked, moving toward her. "Don't become a scandal, honey. Don't do this to yourself. This. You know what this is, Mom? Do you know what it's like to fear for your life at a rich people's party where no one sees you as a person? You don't understand how the world works, Valerie. There are men you can't touch. Sebastian is one of them." Valerie looked at her, hurt but no longer surprised. "Why did you raise me to be quiet? Why didn't you teach me to defend myself?" Teresa didn't know what to say. She just collapsed onto the sofa, trembling. "Because I didn't know how to do it myself." Valerie swallowed. She had waited her whole life for that confession, but now it meant nothing. "Then watch me, Mom," she said, "because I am going to do it. For you, for Matteo, for all the women who live in fear." And without another word, she walked out of the house. The ceremony was scheduled for 6 p.m. Around the venue, a property surrounded by lavish gardens and guards with earpieces. Politicians, businessmen, artists, and journalists gathered, all invited by Sebastian. It was an event meant to seal not just a loving union but a power strategy. No one knew that day there would be no alliance, only fire. Valerie arrived alone. The driver she hired parked far away. She walked through the crowd with a firm stride. No one seemed to recognize her at first. Her face, bruised and makeup-free, contrasted with the image everyone had of the perfect bride. When she entered the ballroom, the whispers began. "What is she doing?" some women murmured. "Why is she alone? Where's the wedding party?" Valerie walked onto the stage. The makeshift altar was decorated with white roses and golden lights. Sebastian wasn't there yet. The orchestra played softly. People were confused. "Good afternoon," she said, taking the microphone. "My name is Valerie Mendoza, and I will not be getting married today." A deadly silence fell over the room. "I want everyone here, especially the media broadcasting live, to hear what I have to say." Sebastian entered at that moment. He saw her and stopped. His face went pale. "Get down from there," he yelled, rushing forward. "What do you think you're doing?" Valerie held up a hand. "Don't come any closer, Sebastian." The security guard hesitated. Sebastian tried to get on stage, but a group of women intercepted him, including a well-known reporter and a former congresswoman who were already suspicious of him. "I told you not to ruin this," Sebastian growled. "I didn't ruin it, you did," Valerie said. She activated the giant screen on the stage. The video began to play. The exact moment Sebastian hit her, the laughter, the things he yelled, her cries. The room erupted into absolute chaos. People stood up, cameras started rolling, there were shouts and flashes. "This is a setup," Sebastian yelled. "She's crazy." But no one was listening anymore. "This is the kind of man I almost married," Valerie said. "A monster in a suit, an abuser with expensive cologne. This is the kind of man society protects because he has money, because he knows how to hide." A tall, elegant man with an impenetrable expression stood up in the front row. Valerie looked at him. Something about him felt eerily familiar. He was also looking at her as if he knew her. "Who is that?" the reporter asked another guest. "Arthur Evans," she whispered. "Senator Evans." Valerie returned to the microphone. "No one is going to silence me. No one." Sebastian tried to lunge at her. 2 security agents stopped him. Then the police, alerted by the district attorney's office, entered with a warrant. He was handcuffed in front of everyone. "This isn't over," he yelled. "You'll regret this." Valerie looked him straight in the eyes. "I already regret not leaving sooner." Senator Evans never took his eyes off her. His arms were crossed, his lips tight. As their gazes met, something in Valerie was shaken. Not with fear, but with intuition. After the chaos, people left the venue as if they had just witnessed a crime. And in a way, they had. Sebastian was put into a patrol car amid shoves and jeers. The media were already broadcasting the video. The story was flying. Valerie was left alone on the stage, trembling inside, though her posture was firm. She knew what she had done wouldn't be forgotten soon, not by her, and not by the country. That night, while she took refuge at a friend's house, she received a message from an unknown number. "You are brave, but you have powerful enemies now. Be careful." There was no signature. Below the message was a photo. It was Teresa, her mother, years ago, embracing Senator Arthur Evans. Valerie's heart stopped for a second. The news had reached the media in minutes, but what no one knew was that this scandal was only just beginning. Valerie hadn't slept in 3 days. Her body was starting to feel the strain, but her mind was in a state of perpetual alertness, as if trapped in an emotional minefield. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the screams, the laughter, the rustle of her ripped dress, and Sebastian's phrase repeated like a cursed echo. "They all belong to me." Since she exposed Sebastian to the powerful elite, her name had been a constant topic of conversation. On social media, she was trending. On TV shows, analysts called her brave, revolutionary, and dangerous. In her neighborhood, some celebrated her, but others whispered behind closed doors, afraid that her words would bring retaliation. Valerie knew that would happen. What she didn't expect was the message, that photograph. Her much younger mother in black and white, embracing a man she now found impossible to ignore. Arthur Evans, the same senator who had been at her wedding, the same one who had looked at her as if he already knew her. For hours, she stared at the image. Her jaw trembled slightly, her fingers rigid. She couldn't ignore the resemblance. The eyes, the chin, the posture. Was it possible? And why had her mother never said anything? She couldn't take it anymore. That morning, Valerie went back home. She pushed the door open forcefully. She found her mother sitting in the old armchair as usual, hands clasped, her gaze vacant. Teresa barely looked up. There was something in her expression that seemed to have been there for centuries. Guilt. "Is it true?" Valerie asked without preamble. Teresa said nothing. "Tell me that photo is fake, that it's not him." Silence. Valerie tossed the image onto the table. Teresa looked at it and closed her eyes slowly, as if the weight of the years had fallen on her all at once. "You knew," Valerie said. "You knew this whole time?" Teresa swallowed. "I didn't know how to tell you. How could you hide something like this from me? He's a senator. He was at my wedding. He was watching me as if I was a product he had left on the market." Teresa shuddered. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand." "Then explain it to me," Valerie demanded. "Because I'm about to go crazy." Teresa got up with difficulty and disappeared into her room. She returned a few minutes later with a dusty old wooden box. She placed it on the table. "Your whole story is in there." Valerie opened the box. Inside were letters, newspaper clippings, photos, and a notebook with yellowed pages. She began to read. The first pages were her mother's personal journal, written in a shaky hand with short sentences. "The senator was young. He met me when I worked as a waitress at a party event. He saw me, smiled, and asked me to wait for him outside. I was naive. I was only 20. Valerie continued to read in silence. On the following pages, her mother recounted how Arthur had seduced her with promises of getting her out of poverty. He bought her an apartment, paid her expenses, but everything changed when she got pregnant. He pulled away. He ordered his people to help her, but only so she would stay silent. A lawyer gave her an envelope with money and a threat. If you talk, you and the baby will disappear. Valerie felt sick. And you accepted? I had nowhere to go, Teresa replied with tears in her eyes. Eusebio showed up then. He married me, knowing you weren't his daughter. He threw it in my face every chance he got. Valerie put her hands to her head. And you never thought I had the right to know? I wanted to protect you, Teresa whispered. Protect me by letting me grow up with a man who hated me? I did the best I could. No, Mom, you did it out of fear. Just like with Sebastian, you always kept quiet, you always bowed your head, and now I'm paying the price. Teresa didn't answer. The tears fell uncontrollably. Valerie didn't move. Rage and sadness fought inside her like two hungry wolves. That same afternoon, Valerie received a call from Matteo's school. He had collapsed. The principal could barely speak. She ran to the hospital as if the world was crumbling beneath her feet. Matteo was in the emergency room, pale, drained of color. The doctor met her with a grave face. He's in acute kidney failure. He needs to be hospitalized immediately. He's at risk of multi-organ failure. He needs a transplant, and he needs it fast. Valerie sat beside her brother's bed. She stroked his forehead. Matteo opened his eyes with effort. Did you win the battle? He asked in a weak voice. I'm still at war, champ, she replied. But I swear I won't give up. Don't marry him. I don't want to see you sad. I didn't get married, and I won't ever let anyone break me again. Matteo closed his eyes again, exhausted. As her brother slept, Valerie felt that the world was demanding more from her than she could give. She had to find a donor, save her brother, protect herself from the threats, process that her biological father was one of the most powerful men in the country, and confront a broken mother who didn't know how to love her. Outside the hospital, journalists were waiting. They yelled her name, followed her, shoved microphones in her face with questions. Valerie covered her face and ran to a side exit. She didn't want to make a show of it. She didn't want her brother's story to be used as media bait. She didn't want more cameras, just peace. That night at home, she found her mother crying. Teresa had a liquor bottle on the table, which was uncommon for her. Valerie approached her, this time with less fury and more exhaustion. I don't want to fight, she said. I'm tired, Mom. Me too, Teresa replied. But I have no strength left. We have to save Matteo. He needs a donor. Teresa nodded slowly. I've prayed every night for him to be saved. But God no longer listens to women like me. I'm listening, Valerie said. Even if it hurts. Eusebio appeared that night. He was drunk. His steps were erratic. His voice slurred. So the princess is famous now, he said, walking in without greeting them. Valerie tensed. Get out, Eusebio. You have no business here. This is my house, he yelled. Your mother owes me and you do too. Teresa stood up. You have no right to come in like this. We're going through a lot. Eusebio shoved her. Teresa fell to the floor. Valerie ran to help her. He took a bottle from his jacket and threw it against the wall. Ungrateful wretches. I gave you everything. Valerie confronted him. Get out of here. Now. He walked toward her, defiant. What are you going to do, call your little TV friends? No, she replied calmly. I'm going to record you. She pulled out her phone and turned it on. Eusebio hesitated, took a few steps back and stumbled. You'll regret this time, I swear, he spat. They're all going to come for you. And he left. Teresa was trembling. Valerie hugged her. We're not going to live in fear. Not ever again. That night, when everything seemed to have calmed down, Valerie tucked her mother into bed. Teresa took her hand. Forgive me for not knowing how to love you well. Valerie looked at her, her eyes misty. I forgive you. But don't ask me to forget. Teresa nodded and closed her eyes with a peace she hadn't shown in years. Valerie kissed her forehead and went to her room. She fell asleep for the first time in days, her phone in her hands. Morning came with a strange silence. When she entered her mother's room, something wasn't right. Teresa wasn't breathing, her face pale, her hands crossed over her chest, between her fingers a broken crucifix, a dry tear on her cheek. Valerie knelt down, trembling. Mom, wake up, please. But Teresa's heart had stopped resisting. And this time Valerie did scream. A cry that didn't seek justice, only solace. Because the silence her mother had carried for so many years had now also taken her life. Valerie didn't cry during the burial. Not because she didn't feel it, but because the pain was so profound it couldn't find a way out. The air smelled of wet earth and flowers wilted by the heat. The coffin descended with an unbearable slowness, while two men in uniform shoveled dirt with indifference. There was no music, no eulogy, just a handful of neighbors who barely dared to look up. Eusebio didn't show, and Valerie was grateful. Matteo wasn't there. He was still in the hospital, growing weaker by the day, fighting amidst tubes and monitors. She had gone alone. There was no mass or priest. Only the voice of the gravedigger who murmured, "That's it," and the hollow sound of dirt hitting the wooden box. Valerie remained there long after everyone else had left, kneeling in front of the freshly closed grave, her nails filled with dirt and her hands clutching the broken crucifix she had found in Teresa's hands. She squeezed it as if it could still transmit something to her, as if from that broken object she could salvage an answer, an explanation, a final hug. As the sun fell on her back, Valerie remembered her mother's last words. Forgive me for not knowing how to love you well. In that moment, it wasn't hatred that pierced her. It was guilt. What if she had waited too long to understand her? What if her rage had become a wall that prevented a true farewell? That night, returning home, she found an envelope under the door. It had no return address. When she opened it, her world was shaken again. Inside was a note written in capital letters. Stay quiet, or we'll bury you with her. Valerie froze. Then, below the note, she found a photograph. It was Matteo leaving the hospital. Someone had followed him, photographed him, threatened him. She trembled with rage. They had crossed the line. She put the envelope away, turned on her phone, put it in recording mode, and spoke. If anything happens to me or my brother, I hold Arthur Evans, Senator, and Sebastian Lujan, a businessman arrested for domestic violence, directly responsible. I have evidence, and I've already shared it. She uploaded the video to the cloud. Then she shared it with 4 people. A human rights lawyer, a feminist activist, a former college classmate, and a journalist named Ivan Carter. Ivan was the first to reply. I need to see you. I know what you're up against, and I can help. Valerie hesitated. She distrusted everyone. But something in that message, in the speed with which he had replied, convinced her. They agreed to meet at a downtown cafe, one without cameras, far from the media noise. Ivan was younger than she expected. Simple clothes, deep bags under his eyes, a notebook always in his hands. He introduced himself with respect. He didn't try to record her or pressure her. He just listened. I've been investigating Arthur for 5 years, he said. But every time I get close, someone disappears, a lead goes cold, a publication gets cancelled. What do you know about him? Valerie asked. Ivan looked at her seriously. More than I can prove. He pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. I have records of deposits to private clinics, undocumented travel to countries where a human trafficking ring is suspected of operating, and documents linking Sebastian to fake foundations used to launder money. Valerie opened it. Among the pages, she found invoices from clinics, names of shell companies, and photos of missing girls who had worked at events organized by the Lujans. My mother? She asked without looking up. Your mother was silenced. I have no proof she knew, but it's clear she was in the way. Valerie felt a knot in her stomach. They hadn't just killed her dignity, they had killed her voice. Teresa didn't die only of grief. She died because she had decided to speak, or because she was about to. She returned home and locked herself in her mother's room. She searched every corner, every drawer, every book. Under the mattress, she found a notebook wrapped in plastic. When she opened it, her heart skipped a beat. It was a diary from the last few months. Teresa had started writing after the engagement to Sebastian. The first pages were innocent, memories, fears, prayers, but at a certain point, everything changed. The man from the past is back. I saw him at the wedding. He looked at me. He didn't recognize me, but I know he can. I have to protect Valerie. I don't want her to pay for what I kept quiet. Valerie read with trembling hands. She turned the pages anxiously until she found one that seemed to have been written with desperation. Girls are disappearing from the community center. No one says anything. Sebastian recruits them for private events. Arthur funds everything. My daughter's father and her future husband are monsters. If I die, please let someone read this. Valerie held the notebook to her chest. She screamed. A scream that was not of pain but of fury, of helplessness. She felt like she was in a prison without bars. She had a truth that was impossible to hide but dangerous to reveal. That night, as she slept next to her mother's empty bed, she received a call from the hospital. Matteo had fallen into a coma. She ran. She didn't wait for a taxi or change her clothes. She ran out in her pajamas as if clothes didn't matter, as if time was her enemy. When she arrived, the doctor met her with a grave face. His body can't take much more. If we don't get a donor in the next few days, he paused as if to soften the blow, he won't survive. Valerie looked at him without responding. She walked to the room, sat next to her brother, and took his hand. You're not going to die, you hear me? She whispered. Not after all this, not after you taught me to fight. Matteo didn't move. His face was a shadow of what it had been. But Valerie talked to him all night, told him stories, asked for forgiveness, and promised she wouldn't leave. The next morning, she received an unexpected call. It was Arthur. The voice on the other end was soft, calculated, almost paternal. Valerie, I heard about your mother and Matteo. I'm so sorry for everything you're going through. She didn't respond. Please listen to me. I don't want to fight with you. I don't want to see you suffer. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but I want to help. What's the catch? She asked. No catch. I just want to get to know you, talk to you, help you save your brother. There are ways, there are resources. I know hospitals that could fast-track the transplant. Valerie clenched her teeth. And do those hospitals also serve as fronts for your trafficking ring? Arthur paused for a long time. I see you're confused. They're filling your head with things you don't understand. I don't need to understand everything to know my mother was afraid of you. She never understood me. She was a fragile, wounded woman. Don't say her name. Valerie cut him off. Don't you dare try to justify yourself. Arthur changed his tone. If you keep this up, you'll lose everything. You already lost your mother. Do you want to lose your brother too? Valerie hung up. The pressure on her increased every day. Anonymous messages, people following her, strange calls. But now she had something stronger than fear. She had a mission. She went to see Ivan. She handed him Teresa's notebook. We're going to publish everything, she said. We're going to make the country find out who they really are. Ivan nodded. But you have to know something. If you do this, there's no turning back. You'll never be able to live a peaceful life again. Valerie took a deep breath. My mother died for staying silent. I don't plan to. That same night, they filmed a testimony. Valerie, in front of the camera with a firm voice and a burning gaze, narrated everything, from Sebastian's abuse to the connections between Arthur, Eusebio, and the disappearance of girls in vulnerable neighborhoods. The video was edited and prepared to be released the next day. Before publishing it, Valerie went to the cemetery. She knelt in front of her mother's grave and, with a lit candle in her hands, whispered, I'm not going to die like you. I'm going to live to break everything that broke you. And she began her own war. Valerie left the cemetery with cold hands, but a boiling rage. She had a notebook with names, dates, and numbers. She had a story no one wanted to tell, and a pain that society had learned to look at askance. But she wasn't about to let the silence bury her too. Ivan was waiting at the clandestine office of an international digital news outlet. It wasn't an elegant building or a modern office. It was an old house with tangled cables, papers everywhere, and a coffee pot that never rested. But it was the only place where the truth wasn't for sale. She walked in and handed him the final piece, Teresa's notebook. Are you sure? Ivan asked as he flipped through the pages. This information could end the careers of half the Congress. I don't care about anyone's career. I want justice. He looked at her with a respect that grew deeper every day. We'll publish it, but not here. We'll do it through an alliance with foreign journalists. If we release it from inside, they'll erase it in minutes. And if they erase me too, she said, then the world will know who silenced me. For the next 48 hours, they worked nonstop. They cross-referenced data, verified documents, interviewed protected witnesses who had worked at foundations funded by Arthur Evans. Stories of girls taken to retreats, of women who disappeared after private events, of illegal clinics where forced abortions and organ trafficking were performed. Valerie didn't sleep, barely ate. Every page she turned was a nail in the coffin of her innocence, but also a brick in the wall she was building to protect those who would come after her. The report was published on a Friday morning in several languages with her face on the cover and a headline that broke the internet like lightning. The Bride Who Didn't Fall. Valerie Mendoza's testimony and the secrets of power. In less than 3 hours, her video statement had reached 5 million views. The comments had everything: support, hatred, threats, and confessions from other women. What had started as an individual complaint had become a collective cry, but the monster also woke up. That same afternoon, Sebastian was released on bail. A judge, bought or intimidated, had cited a lack of conclusive physical evidence and a possible media-driven motive on the part of the victim. He walked out of the jail with dark sunglasses and a twisted smile. Hours later, Valerie disappeared. She was leaving the hospital where Matteo was still in a coma when a black car intercepted her. There were no screams, just 2 well-dressed men in gloves. They forced her into the car. They covered her head and drove her through streets she couldn't recognize. They threw her into a windowless room. He was there, Sebastian, thinner but with the same arrogance. "Did you think I'd just sit back and watch you destroy my life?" Valerie didn't answer. She just looked at him with a pure contempt that disarmed him for a moment. "This is all your fault," he continued. "I gave you a life you never would have reached, and this is how you repay me." "You gave me nothing," she said. "What you couldn't buy, you destroyed." Sebastian approached her, stroking her face with the tips of his fingers. She didn't move. "I thought you would love me, that you would understand that sometimes love hurts." "That wasn't love. That was power disguised as a ring." He smiled. "What a shame you don't get it, because now no one will be able to help you." At that moment, the door burst open. Ivan, with a bloody face and a bat in his hand, entered with another journalist who had been following his GPS. The chaos was immediate. Sebastian tried to escape. One of the men struggled with Ivan. Shots rang out. No one died, but the police arrived minutes later, alerted by an anonymous call. Sebastian was arrested again, this time for aggravated kidnapping, but Valerie no longer felt safe. The system didn't protect those who spoke up. That night, at Ivan's house, as he treated a cut on her eyebrow, Valerie felt for the first time that her body no longer trembled when someone touched her. "You don't have to stay," he said in a low voice. "But if you decide to, this place is yours." She looked at him. She wanted to hug him, to trust him, to feel that it was still possible to love. But the pain had left such deep scars that she couldn't give herself completely. "I want to be with you," she whispered, "but I can't promise I'll heal soon. I'm not asking for that, just that you don't leave." And she didn't. Days passed. Matteo was still in a coma. The threats increased. The scandal grew. Arthur Evans remained silent, taking refuge behind prepared statements and conferences full of euphemisms. One morning, Valerie received a call from the hospital. "We have a compatible donor." Her heart skipped a beat. "Who is it?" "Confidential donation," but it came from a private clinic directly managed by Senator Evans' office. Valerie hung up and went to the hospital. She entered the room with a burning heart. Matteo was still there, pale and unreachable. She took his hand and spoke to him softly. "They're going to operate on you, little brother. You're going to live, but there's something I have to do first." Hours later, she appeared at the senator's office, this time without fear. Arthur received her with a drink in his hand, surrounded by paintings and carved wooden bookshelves. "I knew you'd come. Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because I don't want to lose my daughter." Valerie froze. "You were never my father. You were just a badly kept secret. I'm the only one who can save Matteo. You know that. That transplant isn't a coincidence. I arranged it, and I can cancel it if necessary. What do you want?" Arthur leaned forward. "Silence. Erase the videos. Withdraw the lawsuits. Make a public statement saying you were manipulated by the media. I'll take care of the rest." Valerie stood up. If I don't, your brother dies. She looked at him without tears, without rage, just with a dignity that disarmed him. I'd rather see my brother die standing than have us all live on our knees. And she left, leaving the door open. Arthur was left alone with the glass in his hand, the threat of collapse about to devour him. The clock kept ticking. Mateo's operation was scheduled for the next few hours. No one knew if Arthur would follow through on his threat. But Valerie was unwilling to back down because if she did, she would be burying not only her mother, but all the women who had been silenced. The clock read 5 p.m. The lights in the operating room went on. Valerie closed her eyes and said in a low voice, "Hang in there, Mateo, because I'm going to turn the hell you gave me into a fire to burn them all down." Valerie's words floated in the air like a promise, like an irreversible sentence. She sat alone in front of the operating room, her forehead pressed against the cold wall of the hallway, while the hospital clock seemed to tick slower than ever. She had been there for over an hour without news. No one looked at her, no one dared to interrupt her. Her body trembled, but not from fear. It was a raw, contained rage that grew with every breath. She knew Mateo's fate was no longer in the hands of the senator or any politician. There was an anonymous donor. Someone else had intervened. Not Arthur, not after that threat. Someone else. Someone brave. Valerie's phone vibrated in her pocket. It was Ivan. "We need to talk." "It's urgent," he said, his voice choked. "Something big is about to break. Mateo's in surgery. I can't leave here." "Then listen. I just got a leak from an international NGO. They're working with Interpol. A coordinated operation has been launched to raid several foundations, clinics, and events linked to child trafficking rings. And it's not just any ring, it's the one behind Arthur and Sebastian." Valerie gripped the phone tightly. "They knew this whole time?" "They knew some of it, but your public statement and your mother's notebook were the key. You're about to bring down an entire system." "What about Arthur?" "He's being watched, but he still has political protection. He'll try to leave the country. Most likely, he'll use his diplomatic immunity to escape by land or from a military airport." "Stop him, Ivan." "I'm on it," he replied, but his voice sounded anxious. "And there's something else. Sebastian won't get out of jail alive. They want to silence him." Before Valerie could respond, a nurse came out of the operating room. "Ms. Mendoza, your brother is stable." The operation was a success. Valerie let out a sigh that tore through her chest. For the first time in days, she felt she could breathe without pain. She entered the room where Mateo was sleeping, his face more peaceful than it had been in weeks. She took his hand and spoke to him in a low voice. "I promised you. You're here. You're going to live, but I need you to wake up. I still need you to help me finish this." Hours later, the video of the international operation began circulating across all media. Helicopters hovered over charitable foundations, federal prosecutors entered private clinics with arrest warrants, and women were rescued from basements disguised as shelters. The images were brutal. The faces that appeared on the screen were familiar: businessmen, public officials, celebrities. The entire country was in shock. Arthur Evans, in a desperate attempt to escape, boarded a private jet at a military hangar. Live cameras captured the exact moment he was intercepted by federal agents before takeoff. He was dressed in black, without a tie, and although he tried to maintain his composure, the sweat on his forehead and the rigidity of his jaw betrayed him. He didn't say a word, didn't look at anyone. Valerie watched everything from the hospital TV with Mateo asleep beside her. A nurse came in with a smile. "You're her, aren't you?" the girl asked. "The one from the video. The one who dared." Valerie nodded, not knowing how to respond. "My cousin disappeared 3 years ago. She was 15. We never knew what happened. Until now. Thank you for not staying quiet." Valerie felt something break inside. It wasn't pain. It was the emotional weight of knowing her story wasn't just hers. It was the story of thousands. Hours later, Ivan called her again. His voice was tense. "I'm being followed. I don't know how many there are. I've felt watched since yesterday, but now they're close. If something happens to me, everything is in the folder I gave you, in the metal box. Hide it well. Release it if I disappear." "Don't say that." "Where are you?" "I'm going to the studio. I'm presenting the final report tonight. They can't stop everything." "Not anymore." Valerie had a bad feeling. That night, as Ivan broadcast his most damning report live, a bomb exploded in the TV station's parking lot. The blast shook the entire building. The fire spread rapidly. Screams, smoke, sirens. Ivan survived, but barely. Valerie arrived at the hospital in the middle of the chaos. She found him in intensive care. His face was burned, his torso bandaged. He had lost the use of his legs. The explosion had shattered his spine. "Don't cry," he murmured with difficulty. "They can't stop us now. It's too late for them." "I promise they'll pay for this," Valerie said, her eyes filled with fury. "Not just for you, but for every buried body, for every stolen life." The news didn't take long to confirm the attack was targeted. The goal was to silence him, to silence her. But they failed. The evidence was already in international hands. The names had been given to human rights organizations. It was no longer a battle of one woman against two men. It was a global battle against an entire system rotten to the core. Sebastian didn't live to see the next sunrise. He was found dead in his cell. The coroner's report said suicide, cuts on his wrists, but the body showed signs of a struggle. Scratches, a broken tooth. No one believed the official story. Valerie was called to testify. She walked through the courthouse hallways with her head held high. She was no longer the scared young woman from the beginning. She was a broken woman, yes, but one who had learned to walk with her cracks. Before the district attorney, she narrated the last few months with surgical precision. She showed videos, audio recordings, documents. She was interrogated for 6 hours. She didn't break. When she left, a group of women was waiting for her outside with signs, with flowers, with tears. "Thank you, Valerie," they yelled. "For us, for all of us." Valerie didn't respond. She walked among them. One woman stopped her. She handed her an envelope. "This was my daughter, 17 years old. She disappeared after working for Sebastian's foundation. Today they called me. They found her alive in another country, in inhuman conditions, but alive. Thanks to you." Valerie pressed the envelope to her chest. She didn't know what to say. That night at the hospital, Matteo opened his eyes. "Did you win the war?" he asked with a faint smile. "Not yet, but we're very close. I saw Mom in a dream. She was happy." Valerie stroked his hair. "She'll be even happier when she sees you walk again." Days later, with Ivan still in recovery and Matteo starting physical therapy, Valerie was interviewed on national TV. She told her story without embellishment, in a firm voice, without crying. "What did you learn from all this?" the journalist asked. "That the price of truth is high. It costs blood, but it also grants freedom." The audience gave her a standing ovation. Online, her face became a symbol. Murals with her image and the phrase "she wouldn't be broken" appeared on the walls of forgotten neighborhoods. Valerie understood that the price of truth was blood, but also freedom. And that was a debt she no longer planned to pay in silence. 3 years passed. The world wasn't healed, but it had changed. Valerie no longer lived in the city. She had moved far away, as far as her wounded soul would let her, to a town in the south where time seemed to move differently. The sky there was clearer, the earth more honest, and the silence wasn't scary. She built a simple wooden house on a hill where she could watch the sunrise without interruption. With her lived 2 men who had been her everything, her refuge, her fight, her driving force. Matteo, her brother, had made a full recovery. He had survived the operation, the therapy, the past. He was now studying medicine. He wanted to heal bodies the way others had helped heal his. He woke up early with books open and hands busy, but always found time to sit with Valerie and share a cup of coffee at sunset. "You know what?" he said to her one afternoon, smiling. "They wanted to bury us. But we were seeds." Valerie laughed. She couldn't always, but with him she could. Ivan had learned to walk again with the help of prosthetics. The attack had marked him forever, but it hadn't broken him. The wheelchair was a phase. He learned to walk with pain and to write with the same intensity with which he bled. He became an author, no longer calling himself a journalist because he said journalism had become too fragile for the truths he carried. He published a book, one that changed everything. It was called The Bride Who Said No. It wasn't a novel, it was a testimony. A raw, heartbreaking, and deeply human journey through Valerie's story. He didn't embellish it, he didn't romanticize it, he showed it as it was. The girl who believed in fairy tales, the woman who was betrayed, the sister who didn't give up, the victim who became a voice. The book was translated into 9 languages, adapted into a documentary, won awards, and most importantly, it saved lives. Thousands of women began writing to her, to Valerie. Letters, emails, messages. Some signed with their real names, others used initials, some didn't sign at all, they just wrote. "I was silenced too, but now I want to speak. Thanks to you, I had the courage to report. I don't know how to heal, but at least I don't feel alone anymore." Valerie responded to every message. With time, she came to understand that what she had lived through couldn't die with her. That's how the foundation was born. She named it Voz Viva, Living Voice, in honor of Teresa Mendoza, her mother, the woman who didn't know how to protect her but left enough clues for Valerie to learn how to protect others. Voz Viva opened its first location in an abandoned house they restored with the help of women from the town. It wasn't luxurious. It had beds, workshops, a communal kitchen, and a circular room where every week, women sat to talk, to cry, to scream, to start over. Not all of them came because of violence. Some were fleeing neglect, others were fleeing themselves. Some didn't even know why they were there, but they all shared one thing: the urgent need to be heard. Valerie didn't give them answers, she gave them time. Every month they organized open gatherings. Women from different places would travel to attend. They brought photos, letters, diaries. They shared what they had never been able to say. There were no cameras, no judges, just them and their truth. One afternoon, an older woman with white hair and trembling hands approached Valerie after one of those sessions. "I had a son with a powerful man. I could never say it. Another man raised him. He became violent. My son never knew the truth." Valerie looked at her without saying a word. The woman began to cry. "You didn't just save him. You saved me too." And they hugged each other, crying in silence. In that instant, Valerie understood that her story hadn't ended. It had just changed form. Mateo graduated as a doctor at 22. He did it with honors. He didn't want a ceremony. He felt it was unfair to be applauded for being alive when he knew so many who hadn't made it. But Valerie organized a small celebration for him in the backyard with wildflowers and paper lanterns. "You became what Mom dreamed of," she said to him, her eyes filled with pride. "You saved me. We saved each other." Ivan, now walking with a cane, watched them from a distance, leaning against the doorway with a tired but honest smile. He didn't write as much anymore. He now dedicated his time to giving talks, to training young journalists who wanted to tell stories with soul, not with sensationalism. But every night before he went to sleep, he wrote a letter to his daughter, the daughter he would have with Valerie because love, though it came late, had found a place. Not a perfect one, not without fear, but a real one. Valerie found out she was pregnant in the spring. She discovered it alone, sitting under the tree they had planted over her mother's ashes. She cried, but not out of fear. She cried out of gratitude, for having made it out alive, for having a future where she no longer had to hide. She didn't tell Ivan right away. She waited. She wanted to be sure she was doing it not out of need, but out of love. And when she told him, he just hugged her and said, "Thank you for choosing me." Despite everything, life went on with scars, but it went on. A year later, Valerie traveled to the city alone. She went to her mother's grave. She brought a letter and read it aloud. "Mom, I forgave you a long time ago, and now I also forgive myself for not having understood you sooner. Mateo is doing well. He's become a man full of light. Ivan and I have a daughter. Her name is Teresa, just like you. Not so she will inherit your pain, but so she can learn from your strength. I made your story into a promise, and I'm keeping that promise. I will live free. I promise you." She placed the letter under the stone next to a dried flower. She stayed there in silence under the midday shade. She didn't feel sadness, she felt peace. When she returned to the town, she found Mateo playing with his niece and Ivan cooking something that smelled burned. "You left without saying goodbye," he said, crossing his arms. "I went to close a chapter." "And did you?" "Yes. Now I can keep writing my own." And she did. Months later, she published her own book. Not Ivan's, but hers. It was titled "I Survived to Tell the Story." It was her voice, unadorned and censored, her entire truth. The prologue read, "I was not born to be a victim. I was born to break chains. And even though they took my innocence, they will never take my voice." And with that voice, she built a world that would never be the same again. Because when a woman decides not to be silent, she doesn't just save herself. She opens a crack through which others can escape, and from those cracks, revolutions are born. What did you think of this story? So many people are living similar situations. We hope Valerie's voice lives on in you too. If this story moved you, share it. Be part of the change. Tell us in the comments what you would have done in a situation like this. Where are you watching from? We'd love to read your responses. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Every gesture from you inspires us to continue creating deep, real stories every day. And don't leave just yet. Our next impactful story is about to appear on your screen. You can click the links you see right now on your screen. They're part of an exclusive selection of captivating stories made just for you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.